During a crisis, every minute counts. Counties set standards for 911 response times, and in Multnomah County, crews often miss that mark.
We do have a problem.
In August, American medical response teams were late to 1 out of every 4 calls classified as life-threatening. But Multnomah County and the ambulance provider disagree on how to fix the problem. There is a staffing shortage, but there's also a long-standing requirement in the county for 2 paramedics per crew, a rarity across the country.
And having another person having your back is really is key to public safety.
They're going to do a better job than one medic, guaranteed.
But does it actually make a difference? And are there plans to change it to improve response times? Investigative reporter Evan Watson explores an issue that could be the difference between life and death. The last fail-safe when you need it the most. Here's the story.
Paramedic Shelby Peterson sought out a job in Multnomah County for a specific reason. Because unlike most places, Multnomah County requires ambulances to be staffed by 2 highly trained paramedics.
That's why I came here. That's why I want to work here. It's what brought me to this county, and it's something that I would be very upset to see go, because I don't want to lose that quality of care that we give our community.
In your experience, a 2 paramedic crew, it provides better care and is more efficient than a 1 paramedic and 1 EMT crew?
In my experience, I think so.
Shelby praises the 2 paramedic requirement, but that requirement's also blamed for the county's problems. With staffing shortages, EMS crews are frequently failing to get to emergencies on time. And this question of how to staff an ambulance is a source of tension between Multnomah County and EMS provider AMR. In the world of emergency medical services, each county or city plays by its own rules. Ambulances are staffed with some combination of paramedics, emergency medical technicians or EMTs, or a licensed first responder. The main thing to know, paramedics are the more highly qualified of the bunch, and Multnomah County requires 2 of them for each ambulance.
That basically requirement has not changed since I started in 1995 as a county medical director.
And you wouldn't recommend changing it?
No, I wouldn't recommend changing it right now.
Dr. John Jew, Multnomah County's EMS medical director, swears by the 2 paramedic system.
I can tell you if I have 2 trained paramedics with you having a cardiac arrest, they're going to do a better job than 1 medic, guaranteed.
In a field where 911 response times are closely tracked and seconds can make the difference, Jew won't budge.
So we're not going to degrade any of our services just because we have a staffing problem.
Even though the county's ambulance provider, AMR, wishes he would. In its annual review, AMR Operations Manager Robert McDonald said Multnomah County should lower its standards because the pool of paramedics is critically scant. McDonald also says that AMR is asking Oregon representatives to lower the college degree requirement for paramedics. After I reported on slow 911 response times, I received messages from people who say they work at AMR. One said that staffing issues could be solved in a month or 2 if AMR and Multnomah County switched to the 1 paramedic and EMT model, saying, imagine the frustration of us at AMR. AMR declined my interview request, but did send me a statement saying my source is correct. Moving to a system with the more common paramedic-EMT combo would quickly solve their staffing challenges in Multnomah County. An AMR official said they are discussing changes with county commissioners. So then I asked the county, are you considering this? Again, a statement, but a clear response. Multnomah County does not intend to change its staffing standard for frontline ambulances. A county spokesperson said 2 paramedics are always better prepared, less stressed, and experience less fatigue and burnout than 1 paramedic working alone.
Our community is best served with 2 paramedics, honestly, because when we have a critical call, there's 2 of us that are there able to communicate with each other. One of us might miss something, and having another person having your back is really key to public safety. So,
Tim Molman is a paramedic with AMR Multnomah County. He says the current system creates better paramedics, and he'd look at leaving if the county changed its requirements.
I'm not trying to knock EMT basics at all. They're fantastic in what they're designed for. I just feel like sometimes when we're getting into the higher acuity calls, we need more people of higher training.
Based on what you see every day in Portland and the kind of emergency situations you're responding to, having those 2 people is needed.
Correct. I think so, yes.
Multnomah County's 2 paramedic requirement is unique in Oregon, and increasingly rare when compared to other cities across the country.
That's not as common now just because there's such a shortage.
Thomas Moore is a junior partner at Fitch & Associates, an EMS consulting company. He says paramedic requirements are entirely location dependent.
I'm not aware of any study or assessment that has suggested that having 2 paramedics is, say, better than having 1 paramedic.
And as cities and counties lower their standards after struggling to hire and retain paramedics, he says there's another clear reason that ambulance providers would want to make that move.
Candidly, is that it costs more to put 2 paramedics on an apparatus than to have 1 EMT and 1 paramedic.
AMR's collective bargaining agreement with local unions sets the maximum pay for experienced EMTs at $61,000, while paramedics with that same experience would make $101,000. Shelby Peterson says she sees the argument for immediate relief.
I do think changing the requirement would provide a short and fast increase to the number of ambulances on the road. However, all that would do is increase my workload as a paramedic because I would have to write more charts, I'd have to do more of the patient care, and that's going to push us towards burnout more. And I think in the long run, all that would do is drive more paramedics out.
Ultimately, Multnomah County and AMR have agreed to a compromise of sorts. Starting this spring, AMR will staff basic life support or BLS teams, which are EMT crews with no paramedics to respond to minor situations. Dispatchers will learn how to triage each 911 call, and eventually these BLS crews will transport patients on their own, reducing the workload for paramedics and hopefully helping with staffing.
About 30% of our calls don't require a paramedic to be there, and we have devised a scheme or a plan to actually fulfill that portion here without a paramedic and basically increase the workforce as a temporary measure until we can stabilize the workforce.
Cities like Seattle and San Francisco already use similar EMS setups. Peterson says she knows lagging response times are alarming, but she still believes the benefits of a 2 paramedic model carry more weight.
Less of us are going to stick around long term if that requirement goes away.
Evan joins me now, and it's an interesting topic. I was recently chatting with Sharon Myron, County Commissioner and ER doc, about this very thing, and she thinks that it is unnecessary to send 2 paramedics to every call, that she really thinks that things should be triaged and send what you need. Maybe you don't need a fire truck to every call. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's definitely the concept here, right? That why don't we have differing levels depending on what we're looking at in terms of 911 calls and what comes in. So the idea here with the solution proposed is that the ALS, or Advanced Life Support teams of the 2 paramedics, would go to most calls, the most severe ones, and then the BLS teams would go to about 30% of the calls that are left over. The interesting part here is there's not that middle gap, the 1-in-1 that you'll see in most counties around Oregon.
And there's no interest in moving towards that?
As of now, no. And that's something interesting I learned in talking with people here. It seems like opinions are pretty strong on both sides. From Dr. John Jew, Multnomah County, who's the EMS medical director, he has the ability to recommend and make any changes to this policy that's been in place for decades now. He says 2 paramedics are the way to go. Meanwhile, AMR looking for all sorts of ways to, back off that 2 paramedic requirement for Multnomah County specifically. And then even paramedics, whether I got emails from someone or talked to them in person, they had strong opinions about whether they wanted to keep the 2 or move to a 1-in-1. So at the moment, it seems we'll probably keep that and then try this BLS element out too.
And you've been a reporter for quite a while. Anything on this story that really surprised you?
I think it was looking at other markets as well. I called and talked to some officials in Seattle or San Francisco, around other parts of the country, to just to get a sense of what they do there and how much that each locality has their own system that they've kind of cobbled together what's best for them. And it's unique to see that, whereas they're not taking too many points of advice from other places. They're like, this works for us. So maybe Multnomah County is starting to see with the shortages of staffing here and the other issues that they have that we need to do things a little bit differently. And we'll just see how quickly they get to that in terms of implementing the BLS and figuring out solutions to these 911 response time issues. They're not getting to calls on time.
Yeah, fundamentally, you want to shorten the response time. And it's interesting that there's no national standard on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the big thing being that, when you call 911, you want a provider to get there on there as soon as they can. Yep. But also you want good medical care. And those 2 things shouldn't be at odds with each other. So how do we marry the 2?
Yep. All right. Great stuff, Evan. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, now it's your turn. What do you think about the issue? Do you find yourself leaning one way or another? Or maybe you're not sure? Let us know. Send us an email, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5600. 5090. Let's switch topics for a moment here. When it comes to Portland's homeless problem, Portland City Council member Rene Gonzalez is not afraid to say no. He was elected this past November. He's a breath of fresh air for many hoping for change in Portland. Gonzalez recently ordered one of the agencies that he oversees, it's called the Portland Street Response. He ordered them to stop handing out free tents and tarps to homeless people. The blowback was withering, but he is standing his ground. I talked with him about his reasoning earlier this week.
And I'm going to give you a little bit of data on this. It's high level. Over 40% of our fire deaths are in the homeless community. Over 40% of our fire burns are in the homeless community. Over 40% of our call volume related to fires comes out of the homeless community. And so we're seeing incredible clustering of volume that our fire department has to respond to. And giving someone a tent without addressing a real heating source is a recipe for a certain amount of tent fires, which leads to, unfortunately, way too many bad fire injuries and in some cases death. And so they came back pretty decisively on that recommendation. And I probably came in also with some preconceived notions. You know, I have deep concern even before we got into this whole topic about fire injuries and deaths, about how tents that are being handed out in the city are being utilized. How many are being used for illegal activity? How many are being used for drug dens? Is it enabling certain behaviors we don't want to occur in the city? That was my perception as a new elected. And when you had the fire department come in and saying very decisively, we don't want anyone associated with us handing out tents in an unsanctioned environment, it was a pretty straightforward decision for us.
And is the fire danger because people are out there, they're getting cold, so they get kerosene or a candle or something like that, and then the tent catches fire?
Yeah, they'll sometimes burn hand sanitizer in a small can. And there was a horrific burn, I believe, last weekend. 40% of the woman's body was now burned, and it was just accidentally knocking over a heating source inside their tent. And then you couple it with the high rates of mental illness and substance use disorder, heavy drug use in many of our unsanctioned camps. This is just a recipe for danger, right? It's that tent will not protect you from severe cold by itself. You've got to generate some other heating source. So even if you're not suffering from mental illness or addiction or heavy drug use, you're going to have to solve this separate heat problem. And you throw in those other factors, it's a very, very dangerous environment.
Gonzalez is in charge of the Fire Bureau for Portland, so he's been thinking very deeply about this. One firefighter told me, we used to respond to addresses, now more and more we respond to locations. So what that means is addresses would be apartments, condos, homes, things like that. Locations, that's mostly homeless related. Portland Fire and Rescue, by the way, responded to roughly 2,000 homeless-related fires in the year 2022. That averages out to more than 5 every single day. Gonzalez is a lawyer. He opened his own law firm, and he also owned a software business here in Portland. That all happened before he was elected to the city council, so he's a very smart guy. He told me that when he took office this past fall, he did not know that this agency he's now in charge of, the Portland Street Response, was giving out all these free tents and tarps. The agency is part of the Fire Bureau and is meant to be a resource that could be sent instead of the police for people having mental health crisis. Gonzalez believes that handing out tents is not part of that. He ordered Portland Street Response to stop giving out the tents. I challenged him on that decision, though, since he made it in the middle of winter when people were in danger of freezing to death. But I could hear people saying, you did this during the winter when people are exposed to the cold. They're going to die out there without those tents to protect them.
You know, we looked back at the spike in hypothermia deaths the year before when we were handing out something like 7 tents per homeless person in the city of Portland. That's the joint offices numbers over that period. So we were seeing increases in hypothermia while our region was handing out record amounts of tents and tarps. And so just don't find it compelling that that's a really an effective way to address it. Where we're putting our energies into is getting folks off the streets into warming shelters when we have them. We have made a commitment in our region that we will expand capacity to meet no matter what the need is during those warming needs. And so we're also increasing transportation. In the last cold spell, both Chat and Portland Street Response were actually involved in transporting some folks off the streets directly to our shelters. We think that's the right direction. Get them in a safe place that actually has safe heating sources is the better way to protect against the cold.
So, no, he's not going to change his mind on that one. And yes, he said there are still other nonprofits giving away other free tents to the homeless. And by the way, if you're frustrated on how much of your tax money is being used to clean up the mess on the streets, tents, and other garbage, so is he.
It's this horrible cycle. I mean, depending on how you count it, let's start with, we're spending a minimum of $12 million a year on cleaning up unsanctioned camps in the city of Portland. That's just the city.
That's just the cleanup.
And then that's just the cleanup. That's not our comprehensive, spend on the homeless problem. And so for a taxpayer to be spending, and that's a minimum number. There's some arguments that's understating the true cleanup costs. To be spending that much on cleanups on the one hand and then handing out the tents and tarps on the other, it just doesn't sit well from a financial stewardship perspective. And then you throw in some of the other things that we witness, whether we can quantify, it's a lot harder. How many of those tents are being used for illegal activities? How many of them are being used for really self-destructive high drug use? And that's when it's harder to quantify that, but we certainly witness it on our streets every day. And just couldn't participate in that going forward, at least not under a bureau I manage.
So there it is, a new tone coming from at least one member at Portland City Hall. Tomorrow night, I'll talk with the commissioner about his view that the Portland area has become too tolerant of bad behavior, and his order that Portland Street Response also be available for homeless folks who are in distress during the clearing of camps, or so-called sweeps. Many in that agency do not want to do that. Finally, we'll talk about whether too many people are coming to the Portland area because it's easier to camp outside and use drugs. Again, look for that story tomorrow night, right here at 6 o'clock. In the meantime, we want to hear from you about this as well. Do you like his attitude and his positions? Not so much. Either one's fine. Send me your thoughts, though. The email is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you. Coming up next on The Story, Portland's first Safe Rest Village opened 10 months ago. So we went back to check on the progress there. How many people have actually moved off the streets? And did issues that neighbors worried about before it opened come to fruition? We'll find out when The Story returns. It's been almost a year since Portland's first Safe Rest Village opened in Multnomah Village. And it's time to check back in because you never know, one could be coming to your neighborhood. And if you don't know what a Safe Rest Village is, well, it's a cluster of tiny homes built to help homeless people get off the streets. There are 4 across the city of Portland right now, and they've created quite a bit of drama in the neighborhoods that surround them. In some cases, people are actually selling their homes because of it.
We're worried about things like needles being improperly disposed of. We're worried about an influx of crime.
That's a woman we spoke with before the site opened, and since she's moved her home and sold. She sold and moved her home, you know what I mean. When it comes to the first site, it opened back in June between an elementary school and a residential neighborhood. The group called All Good Northwest manages the site. Since it opened, they've moved 49 people off the streets and into these tiny homes. 9 of those folks have since moved into permanent housing.
Our chief focus is really on participants and moving people to that place where they're not on the streets and they're thriving.
We talked with one woman who recently moved into a home next to a Safe Rest Village. She tells us she paid much less than the asking price for the place. Neighbors we heard from did not really complain about theft or drug use, which is nice, but their biggest issue was noise. Things like slamming doors, yelling, and shouting. Along with the 4 Safe Rest Villages already open in Portland, 3 more are supposed to open soon. One question that you viewers always have is, how much are these little villages costing taxpayers? Our Blair Best explains.
So here's a little background on how these sites are being paid for. When this whole Safe Rest Village project is complete, there's going to be 8 Safe Rest Villages across the city, and all of them will be funded through the city's federal grant with the American Rescue Plan Act. Now, each site, I'm told, will cost about $1.5 to $3 million per year. And I asked specifically, will any local taxpayer dollars be used for these sites, for staffing, food, different supplies? And they said no, all of that is being funded through the federal grant.
All right, thank you, Blair. Still to come on the story. You had plenty to say about our interstate bridge story last night. We loaded you up with details about what to expect and what still needs to be decided. We'll bring you a brief recap and then answer a question we always get when we talk about this project. Hey, what about a tunnel? Yeah, we'll get to that when the story returns. The I-5 bridges over the Columbia River create one of the most important pieces of infrastructure in the entire Pacific Northwest. That's why our show is taking a close look at the replacement project and bringing you lots of updates as the process moves along. Yesterday, we spent more than 10 minutes going over the different details that have seeped out of hearings with lawmakers and interviews our crews done with the bridge team. We're not going to go over everything that we covered yesterday, but there are a few highlights worth reminding you about. The bridge design will be a twin-span structure, just like the current bridge. 2 bridges side by side, one for southbound traffic and light rail, the other for northbound traffic and a bike and pedestrian path. They're looking at 8 and 10 lane versions, so either 4 lanes of traffic one way or maybe 5. The twin span approach stretches the overall construction timeline to as long as, get ready for this, 8 years of construction. So it's going to be going for a while. And then there's the cost to think about. The estimate for the entire project is around $6 billion, give or take $1 billion. The bridge alone, the part that goes over the Columbia, not another bolt. It's going to cost about $1.5 to $2 billion. And then there's the interchanges. The interchanges around the bridge, rebuilding and upgrading 7 of those surrounding I-5 interchanges. There's going to be 4 on the Washington side, 3 on the Oregon side. Check out the price tag for that. Between $2 and $3 billion, more than the actual bridges. And the addition of light rail would run between $1.3 and $2 billion more. Oregon lawmakers want to cap the cost of the whole thing at $6.3 billion, but it remains to be seen if they can even do that. After our segment last night, we asked you for your thoughts on the bridge plan as it stands right now. Light rail is a sticking point for many of you. John says, stop building for yesterday and build for tomorrow. 10 lanes and no light rail tracks and 2 alternative lanes each way. Start building this bridge ASAP. But Marty chimed in. We get one chance to do this. Let's do it right. Do not leave out light rail max. It has to be part of the plan. And then there are folks like Dan who want it all.
I'm 75 years old. I wasn't born here, but I've lived here for many, many years. Went to school, went to Grand High School, Reed College. Back in those days, the bridge was outdated back then. Let's go ahead and make it big. Spend all the money, make it big for the new people. I don't care anymore, but it's for the young people. Make it big, make it tall, make it easy.
Thanks, Dan. I love that. Spend all the money. And we can't ignore another aspect that comes up with every single time that we talk about the bridge replacement. Several voicemails and emails sounded just like this.
Have they looked at doing a tunnel and the cost of that? Because on the East Coast and other states I've been in, it's a very common item to take a tunnel.
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is yes, they have looked at tunnels. 2 different options. First, a bored tunnel. That's a huge tube that basically goes under the river. Problems with the bored tunnel include things like how deep it would have to be and the cost. They didn't even do an estimate because apparently it'd just be out of this world. Then there's the immersed tunnel. That's a tunnel that's put together in segments, then sunk into a channel that's cut in the floor of the river. For that option, a few interchanges would need upgrades, and there are environmental concerns because of the need to trench and dredge the entire width of the Columbia River. That idea would cost around $3 billion only for the tunnel, but the replacement team favors the bridge option. That's just scratching the surface of the tunnel drama, by the way, but it sure looks like we're going to get another bridge and not a tunnel. Keep sending your questions and comments, though. We want to hear them all. The address is thestory@kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this, but first a preview of what to expect at 6:30.
Straight ahead at 6:30, a desperate search for Multnomah man who's been missing for 5 days. We hear from volunteers who are combing through the woods right now to find him. Plus, some Clackamas County lawmakers are pushing for a pause on tolling Interstate 205. What's in a new bill they've introduced in Salem? And if you're an adventurous foodie, there's a new way to try new tastes while supporting women and BIPOC-owned restaurants in Portland. We'll show you how. That's next at 6:30. We hope to see you then.
Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.